Writer's Corner is made possible thanks to the following sponsors. Jaime's Haberdashery of St. Paul has become an anchor of the downtown business community. A modern store with classic decor, it provides everything in clothing, both custom and tailored, plus offers a huge selection for both men and women. There is now also a Jaime's in Red Wing. Calumet Editions, an eclectic publisher of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, introduced a new business model nearly a decade ago, in which the publisher and author work as equal partners in a joint venture. Their stable of authors have won numerous and prestigious prizes across literary forums. Where traditional publishers fail to see the value in projects, Calumet cooperates with his authors in realizing a book's potential.
Welcome to Writer's Corner. Alan Miller with you, and as you know, we usually have two writers sitting opposite and talking about their craft. We're very fortunate today to have one special guest, and I really thank him for coming in, Chris Hewitt of the Star Tribune, here with a dead battery and all sorts of things, a raspy throat, but we really thank you for coming in.
I made it. Thank you.
Now, you've been with the Pioneer Press and the Star Tribune. You've been the movie critic and now the book editor of the Star Tribune.
Correct. I seem to think I know about everything.
And you have just a few books sitting around.
Yes, at the Star Tribune we have a book room where publishers send advance copies of books that are going to come out in the next, gosh, I guess I'm getting them now for August, so the next several months. And we have them shelved by month, so I can kind of at a glance know what might be something we want to talk about when we get to February or March or April or whenever.
You read a tremendous number of books.
I do read a lot, yeah. I've always read a lot, even before I was doing this job, actually.
And you also critique a lot of movies.
I do about one a week now. Yeah, I've had different arrangements, but yeah, currently I do one a week.
And in the year that you have been the book reviewer, and it's just about a year now, I've noticed that you spend a little bit more attention than your predecessor, Lori Herzl, on local authors.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I think she did a great job on local authors. Probably, basically anything I know about the job, I learned from her. So in my head, I always kind of have WWLHD running through my head. So it may just be that I've lucked out and there have been more with new books out or something, but.
No, we're very fortunate in Minnesota to have a tremendous proliferation of good authors. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, I believe the Minnesota Book Awards were announced, and there are a bunch of, was it the Minnesota Book or the
Edgar Awards were.
The Edgars.
The Minnesota Book Awards announcement, as we're talking, is coming up, I think, in a couple of weeks.
For the viewers, tell us what the Edgars are.
They're given by the Mystery Writers of America, which is obviously national association that I'm not quite sure how long it's been around, but a good long time, many, many decades, because people like Agatha Christie, who died in, I think, 75, have been recipients of them. But they give awards in numerous categories. There's one for young adult fiction, there's one for different sorts of mysteries, and they just announced, as you mentioned earlier this week, that Jess Lowry's The Taken Ones is a nominee. I think that is in the category of maybe paperback originals. And William Kent Kruger's The River We Remember. And also there's a young adult nominee.
No, I know you did the reviews on both Kent Kruger and I believe Jess Lowry.
I did not review the Jess Lowry book, but I did a Q&A with her when it came out. Yeah. It's good. It's a little bit supernatural thriller, I would characterize it as.
That's one of the things that you do in addition to reviewing. You also do Q&As with some of the authors.
Yes, and Yeah, we just did one with Grey Wolf Press,
Right.
is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year, so we just chatted with their director.
Last Sunday, right.
And I interviewed a bunch of mystery writers for a story that will be in this Sunday's paper about why there happen to be so many Minnesota mystery writers. And I'm talking to Kate DiCamillo next week. She has a new book coming up. I'm talking to this guy, not local, but he is teaching some classes at the Loft, whose name is Steve Almond, who also has a book coming out about how to write a novel. And so, yeah, I get to talk to lots of smart people in this job, which is a good bonus.
You know, a benefit of the job.
For sure.
It's not viewing corpses at murders, although with Minnesota mystery writers, you get your share of corpses and murders.
Possibly more than our share, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about what we're going through right now with book banning and censorship? And we just did a program on that.
Oh.
I did a program on that with Justice Anderson, retired of the Supreme Court. But what's your take on it? Because it really, really troubles me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm obviously against it, probably pretty much a First Amendment absolutist. And, you know, I guess we're fortunate to be sheltered from that a little bit in Minnesota, that we haven't had a ton of that, but we did have a story in the paper not too long ago about some, you know, school districts and Anoka Library, I think, is having some issues with people wanting books removed. And yeah, it is very troubling that we're seem to be going in exactly the wrong direction on that.
Florida just took some dictionaries off the shelves because they mentioned sex.
Yeah.
Well, define sex. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, and you know, part of the human condition that is an important part of it. So yeah, I don't quite get that.
Excuse me, but I'm having throat issues as well as you.
Oh no.
So, one of the things I've noticed in your reviews is you are not hesitant to criticize something that you don't really find enamoring.
I mean, I guess I think that's the job, to talk about what's good and bad. And we are much more inclined to want to review books that we think people are going to want to read. But, you know, every once in a while there's a book from, let's say, a prominent author who people are going to already have built-in interest in, and it doesn't do what it is setting out to do, like the recent John Grisham sequel to The Firm.
That's the one I was just going to bring up, because when I read Grisham's latest book, I was really disappointed.
It's horrible.
This is not a John Grisham book. I mean, I don't know where he was in the writing of it. And you were not reluctant to say that. In fact, you recommended another book which I have requested from the library to read as a result of.
Oh, I hope you like it. Yeah, that was a good one. But yeah, it's baffling to me, and that is a case where, you know, the book was obviously going to get so much attention, and The Firm, the book that the new one, The Exchange, is the sequel to, was so widely popular that I knew people were going to be interested in it. So I wanted to devote some attention to it, and I tend to like John Grisham books. I think he kind of has a formula, and he's maybe not the best stylist, but he sure is great on plot. And this one isn't even good at that. It is terrible. Another
one was The Boys in the Boat, which was an interesting book, but you had reservations about it.
Well, I love the book, which I didn't actually review. That came out many years ago. But the movie, I did have some reservations about. Yeah. And, you know, you could argue that it kind of boils down to the movie's not as good as the book, which is sort of the story on almost every movie that is made from a book. But
now, one of the things you have discussed in a couple of columns is who is the greatest Minnesota author?
Oh, yes. I don't think I necessarily weighed in on that. In fact, I'm not even sure if I could make a pick there. And of course, there are also lots of category areas where you could quibble, like, do they have to be born here? Do they have to, how much time did they have to spend here? Is August Wilson a Minnesota author because he wrote a bunch of his plays while in St. Paul? Is Gordon Parks a Minnesota author, even though he's not actually from here, but he did live here for his formative years? So a lot of that was dealt with in those columns.
Lewis is a name that comes up.
He's one who definitely is a Minnesota author. I mean, he was born here, he spent a lot of time here, he wrote about here a lot. And so, yeah, we asked readers to name their favorites because it began with a poll that we read about that indicated that Sinclair Lewis was the favorite, and I thought our readers might not necessarily agree with that, and some of them did agree with that, but they had lots of ideas, including some of those mystery writers that we've talked about, and including Louise Erdrich, who's kind of an obvious choice and for sure qualifies, even though she's actually, I think, from South Dakota, but she's been here most of the time.
Periphery.
Yeah. But anyway, there were lots, and it was interesting to hear from readers because I learned about some writers who I either didn't know were from here or who I didn't necessarily think of from here, who have also spent a lot of time here.
See, one of my favorites is William Kent Kruger.
Lots of our readers, too.
He was here, I guess, the second month we did this show, and it was a very interesting show about how he works, and he actually still writes by hand, and he goes to a coffee shop in the afternoons, and he sits down with his yellow pad and pen, and he writes his novels. And I found that fascinating.
Yeah, everybody seems to have their different methods. I talked to, actually, Jess Lowry, the other of those Edgar Award nominees we talked about. She told me she has 4 different places in her house where she writes, and in each of those 4 places, she does different kinds of things. Like, one of those spaces is good for editing. One of those spaces is a couch to curl up on and take notes. One has a big table that she can move around pieces of whatever she's writing. So, yeah, everyone, I guess, has their method.
Now, you also had an article recently about 19 books to read in 2024.
Yeah.
How do you pick the 19 books? Is that you alone, or is that you with a
That was me
bunch of
alone,
others?
and yeah, it's hard because there are so many good books coming out. In fact, I just read yesterday a story on the website lithub.com. And it was a column that was arguing that March of this year is going to be the best month for of book publishing in history. Like,
really?
there are more, it was saying, there are more good books coming out in March than have ever come out in any month. And I think she was probably exaggerating a little bit, but there is a lot of good stuff coming up. So I kind of just had to look at the notes I've taken as I've gotten press releases about stuff. And of course, there are certain writers that I tend to be drawn to. Some of them were first novels, so something or other about the information I'd received about them grabbed me. But yeah, I easily could have picked way more than 19 because there are a lot of good books to look forward to.
As I had a first novel last year and a second novel this year, well, not this year, but 23 and 22, I started late. I've been doing writing since I'm 12 years old, but all sorts.
There are distractions in life that keep us from the things we maybe were meant to do.
Writing law briefs for many years, sports writing for quite a few years, worked in the Star Tribune as a college freshman as a page.
Oh,
so
son of a gun.
It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I have, as I like to say, more rings around my trunk than a sequoia. So how do you decide what to review?
Gosh, it's a multifaceted answer, I guess. Sometimes I'll get a press release saying, blah, blah, blah has a book coming out in August, and immediately know. Like, if I get Louise Erdrich does have a book coming out this fall, and I can tell you right now we're going to review it. So some are a slam dunk like that. Kate DiCamillo has a book coming out in March. As I said, I'm about to interview her. So I'm not so sure we're going to review that, actually, but we're definitely interviewing her because we want to make sure people know about that book. We are fortunate to have quite a few really talented freelance writers who sometimes will get a press release about a book or hear about a book on Spark2 and say, hey, Chris, I would like to write about this book. Excuse me. And if it seems like one that our readers will want to know about, I definitely will say yes to that.
That's another question I was going to ask you is how do you pick your reviewers?
Well, most of the ones that I've been fortunate to work with, I inherited from my predecessor, Laurie Herzl, who was a member of the National Book Critics Circle and went to their conventions, in fact, was the president at one point. And so knew lots of critics and was able to get a lot of them to write for the Star Tribune. So I'm lucky to be able to sort of just pick up that mantle and work with people who we already know are good and have good ideas about stuff that our readers might be interested. And some of it is just, you know, my instinct about, oh yeah, this seems like something that people would want to know about or should know about. And sometimes I do a thing, I'm a person, up until a year ago, I'm a person who said I always finish every book I start, even if it's not good. And people would tell me that's dumb because there's so many good books, you'd be wiser to spend that time on the good ones. But I don't know, I always hoped they would get better and felt like I should give it its full due. But now that's not the case. I will often have a stack of books at home that my intention is to see if they might be of interest to readers. So I'll read like the first 50 pages and have to make a determination based on that if we're going to go yay or nay on reviewing them. And I feel guilty about every one of those books that I don't end up finishing, but some of them I do, of course, because they turn out to be terrific. But so that's another way to
but there's
decide.
A limit to what the human can consume.
There is, and I'm reluctant to learn that, but I'm beginning to learn that the large shelf of books that I'm hoping to get to at home may never happen.
Now, is it true that you have read every Agatha Christie novel chronologically?
Yes, I had read all of them non-chronologically around the time that I was in junior high. Pardon me, my grandmother introduced me to them because she had paperback copies of most of them. So I fell in love with them then, and I think I'd return to them periodically, but not for a long time. And then probably 7 or 8 years ago, I just, for whatever reason, got to be in my bonnet to read all of them in order and blog about them at a Tumblr, which is called Chris and Christie, sort of like Julie and Julia, the book that came out a few years ago. And yeah, so I read them all again and fell in love with them all again and found lots of new stuff in them that I had never thought about before. They're so good.
When you read a book, do you like a character-driven book more than a plot-driven book, or does it not make any difference?
I wouldn't say it doesn't make any difference, but I definitely can like both. I mean, part of, and I guess I learned this writing about movies, part of the job is to be willing to respond to almost anything. Like when I started writing about movies more than 30 years ago, I would have told you, Westerns, not my most favorite thing, or sci-fi, another one that isn't maybe my favorite genre, but there definitely are things in both of those genres that I am crazy about. And so a big part of it with a movie or a book is to just kind of go in with an open heart and be open to what it is that the writer wants to do and hope that they succeed at doing it. So I would say I can respond to both of those. And it's kind of different moods. Like a great plot-driven thriller, I'll certainly rip through any time. But sometimes I want a book that introduces me to people that I would never meet and are interested in learning more about. And so yeah, it can be both. And you know, I read lots of nonfiction too. So.
And poetry actually on occasion as well.
Not as much. I need to read more poetry. We just assigned a poetry review, which I'm very glad to have done.
Now when you say we,
it means me, actually.
Yeah.
We, the book section is the we, but it's
that's
me.
That's what I kind of figured.
Yeah.
And
pardon me.
You did an interesting one on the Streisand opus.
Oh, yeah.
And I call that an opus because it's 900 pages.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an adventure because, I mean, I'd known for 8 months that it was coming and that we were probably going to do something about it because people are interested in her. And this book has been anticipated for something like 15 years. She had initially said she was doing it. But the publisher, you know, usually, as I said, we get advance copies of books months before they come out. But in this case, the publisher was basically sitting on it because I don't think they wanted details to leak. So they didn't send it until like the week before, and somehow mine never materialized. So they ended up having to send it again, and I was trying to get it in right away. But with our deadlines and the fact that it was 970 pages or whatever it is,
yeah,
it took a while. And ultimately, because I didn't get the book, they were able to send me the audio book, which is 48 and a half hours long, and
wow,
which she reads. So I was able to get a start on it that way, and surprisingly, maybe, that's the first time I've ever listened to an audiobook. And it was a good place to start. She does a great job.
I avoid audiobooks. I like to have that book in my hand.
Me too.
I have been known to mark them up, and no, I appreciate the fact that you're not feeling that well and you came in anyway.
Sorry about that, yeah.
I was mentioning David Housewright, who I think is one of our fine authors locally, and was president of the Mystery Writers Association.
And I think a winner.
He's, yeah, an Edgar Award winner, among other things, and has been a terrific mentor for me, but brutal, but
sometimes that's what you need in a mentor.
but terrific.
Yeah, I need to read his books. I've somehow missed him, so I'm gonna make sure and hop on the next one when it comes out.
And the late, I think it's the late Elmore Leonard. Do you read many of his?
I definitely have read some of his. Probably the kind of the ones that everybody has read, like Get Shorty. I read. Yeah, I think he's considered one of the most vivid stylists of any writer. Like, you could read a couple of paragraphs and instantly know that it was him.
Yeah,
he's fun to read. Yeah,
very unique. And
he is. Yeah, I wish we could get some more of him.
Not like the E.E. Cummings of poetry, but very unique.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell he's influenced probably by Raymond Chandler, but also he's way funnier than Raymond Chandler is. So every once in a while I read. Actually, I'm having trouble remembering Stolen Coast is the book you were talking about that I recommended to people instead of John Grisham.
Right.
And that writer, you can tell, is influenced by
Dwyer Murphy's book.
Dwyer Murphy, you can tell, is probably a fan of Elmore Leonard.
And well, I just lost a thought, but
sorry about that.
No,
diverged.
not at all. Michael Connolly.
Yeah,
really fine writer.
I think I've read all of those, and he's, you know, a former crime reporter in LA who has, gosh, I would say 36 mysteries, maybe.
Yeah.
Pretty much every fall there's a new one. He does the Harry Bosch books and the Mickey Holler books, and he has a new series. I'm forgetting the name of the woman who's the detective in those. They all kind of work together too. So I'm always looking for the new. I think November is usually when they come out. I'm always looking for the new one of those.
I am not enamored of the world's busiest author, James Patterson, but
he's another one I've never read. I'm suspicious because there are so many of them, but I'm actually about to read my first one, and in fact it just came into the office today. It's about the secrets of people who sell books and of librarians, and I'm kind of...
Oh, I just saw it advertised, yes.
It's nonfiction, and I'm kind of fascinated by at least the idea of it, so I'm going to give it a whirl.
He usually writes his mysteries with somebody else now.
Well, and he has to farm out some of that work to, I don't know, interns or something. Doesn't he have like 6 or 7 books a year?
At least.
It seems a little bit nuts.
He's like Freeman, who used to be living here, is now down in Florida. But,
Brian Freeman?
Yeah. Brian, who's doing
he does the Bourne books, I think?
He's doing the Bourne books, and he's got... He's putting out 4 books this year. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to speak with him, actually.
Yeah. And he's fled to Florida.
I did not know that. Full time?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. just during the year last year. Because he was on the show several times, and I castigated him for running out on our weather. But it's been said that you claim that Jane Austen never goes out of style. Is that true?
I would say that's true. I am a big Jane Austen fan. And, you know, she's another person. You certainly read lots of books and think, this person I think is a Jane Austen fan, or read Jane Austen as a kid or whatever. Now, Eleanor Lippman, for instance, is one.
Who picks the best books of the year when you make that selection? Is that you alone, or do you discuss it with others?
We did it a little differently this last year. It was me, but some of the books that I picked were based on freelancers' reviews, and in that case I consulted with the freelancers and said, you know, here are 3 books that seem like they maybe could be considered in our top 10 that you reviewed. Are there any of them that you would advocate for or not? So I ultimately assembled the list, but it was with input from a few of our freelancers.
Well, we're running through our time, but are there any books you would recommend to our viewers? Really, not necessarily mysteries, but really good books that are out now.
I would say my favorite book that I've read this year, and it actually does not come out until, let's see, it's either January 28th or February 4th. Anyway, soon, is by this woman named Margot Livesey. She is Scottish, and the book is called The Road to Belhaven. It's a novel set in the, I think, late 19th century, about a woman who has a little bit of a extrasensory gift, and she's growing up on a farm and longs for things she can't have, and it's fantastic.
And it'll be reviewed.
It is going to be reviewed by moi. A rave. I can spoil the review right now. I liked it a lot.
We've been very fortunate, and I really thank you for coming in, especially on a day when you feel less than wonderful. And your car broke down, or your battery died.
Crazy day.
Chris Hewitt of the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. And I look forward to, as you can see, I have a whole bunch of Chris Hewitt reviews here.
I've been busy, apparently.
And I look forward to them, especially every Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.